Welcome and thanks for coming on. This is the first installment of Academy Sessions, which is kind of a format where we interview people from the community, Ethereum and blockchain in general, and mainly really to, I don't know, help our students figure out what they want to do in blockchain after having finished our course. And also these are going to be available publicly for anyone else who's kind of interested in learning more about blockchain and Ethereum. So first of all, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell me a little bit about who you are.
Absolutely. Sure. My name is Tim Coulter. I am the creator of Truffle. I am a full stack developer at ConSensys. Joined ConSensys roughly in April of 2015. And when I joined, there wasn't a whole lot of tools available in the Ethereum space. I had to, what I found is that I had to make my own if I wanted to make dApps easily. And that's roughly how Truffle was born, from that need. I've been working at startups for the last maybe 7 or 8 years, pretty much my whole adult career. And previously to ConSensys, I was a QA engineer. So I spent most of my time specializing in QA while spending my free time doing all the development work that I love to do. Finally came over to ConSensys and decided that this time I'm going to be a developer. But it just kind of fit because what I was doing in QA was pretty technical stuff, mostly building software testing tools for the various startups I worked with. And so once I got to ConSensys, it just kind of fit that I could build Truffle.
Cool. So for most of the people who are going through our training, they're developers already, or have at least some kind of technical understanding, and it's obviously mostly aimed at developers. So for them, what's your technical background? Where did you start?
Yeah, so well, I had started programming since I was 13. I was, I mean, if you want to know where it really started, it was on a graphing calculator in math class. I wanted games. I didn't want to do math. Started there. My dad was in software or computers as well, and so he told me to do C++. So I did that for a long time. But then I moved over to web software. I was building websites before I even went to college. Knew I wanted to do that. I have a software engineering degree. So most of my experience comes from websites, JavaScript, server-side stuff. Mostly Ruby on Rails is my favorite backend before Ethereum. And so when I decided to build Truffle, I modeled a lot of the things after what I found in Rails, and it's still there's still work to do, but you'll see some of the similarities there. So you'll see, for instance, Rails database migrations.
Yes, absolutely.
Is very similar to So some things are simplified in Truffle. It's a different context than it is in Rails, but the idea was to be able to build Ethereum applications just as quickly. So my background is in that space. I have tons of different languages, on my belt, but my favorite right now is JavaScript.
Cool. So what I always find interesting is to see how people first came across blockchain and what was the thing that interested them in the technology. So what was that for you? When did you first come across, and what made you think this is something interesting?
Yeah. Well, I was working at one of these startups previous to ConSensys 2 years ago. Friend told me I should more than 2 years ago actually. Friend told me that I should get into Bitcoin. It's so awesome, and this is when Bitcoin was like at $3 or something.
Mm-hmm,
and I'm like, no, whatever, Bitcoin. I thought nothing of it. And then, you know, obviously Bitcoin got really exciting towards the end of 2013. And I finally jumped onto that hype and got interested in it and did my research and thought it was really cool. But by that time, you know, Bitcoin was too hard to get into for me. And so I started researching different altcoins. Various altcoins. It was a new introduction for me to trading as well. So I had never done any stock trading or any other trading. So this was kind of a good introduction for me to understand that and how that works, because I never thought I'd work in anything related to finance, but somehow this technology-based and financial applications interested me. So I got into mining at that point. Ended up, this was in the middle of 2014. Ended up mining, or ended up having something like 12 GPUs at one point, 2 rigs going. I was in an apartment, so I was sharing a room, and my room was hot all the time, and just was really excited about that. And then eventually, one of the startups I was working with, towards the beginning of 2015, they went out of business. They they ran out of money, as startups do, and I ended up having to find something else. Well, at that point, I was really excited about blockchain, just blockchain in general. And so I knew that I wanted to find some blockchain related job. Now, I had no idea about Ethereum at that time. And it just so happened that I saw a job posting on Angel.co for ConSensys. And it was a job posting for a user interface designer, which I'm not, but I decided to apply anyway because it sounded really exciting. So applied. I said that, look, I'm not a user interface designer, but I would love to do to write some blockchain software, and that was it. And from there, I've come to the Ethereum community and built what kind of what I needed, and then shared it with the world. And now people like you are getting involved. I mean, it's pretty much everything I can ask for as far as the job is concerned.
So let's talk about Truffle. Obviously, Truffle is an open source project. So how does that fit in with your job at ConSensys, and how does that, when did it start? What's the context?
Yeah. So ConSensys, especially when I joined, I was employee number 11 or somewhere around there. So a very small company when I joined, and the idea behind ConSensys at that time was to foster the Ethereum community, because it was a small and growing community. And what we did as a company was find anyone who was doing anything cool with Ethereum or anything that they found exciting, and try to effectively give them a job, give them the resources to do what they need to do to build this community, to build the tools, to build cool dApps, to make the Ethereum network grow. And it really let us do whatever we felt compelled to do, wherever we felt most passionate about, felt most useful. And for me, I noticed a lack of tools in the space, and decided that I was going to fill that niche. Now, Truffle started as a bunch of scripts that did what I needed to do. So I had one script for deployment, I had one script for compiling, I had one script for building the front end. And then it eventually got to this point where I was moving from project to project to project, from dApp to dApp, trying new things, and I was copying these scripts over. And then as I was copying them, I was adding new features that I needed, and it got to the point where I needed to just make this a tool. I needed to make this a command line tool that will do this work for me. And from there, Truffle was born. Truffle has always been open source. We have ConSensys is committed to leaving Truffle open source, and we think building Truffle and all the work required, all the costs required, is completely worth it in providing that value to the community, to the Ethereum community. And as we can see, we're getting that value back. For instance, people like you who are making these videos or teaching people how to use it, or we've had so many different contributors to Truffle projects, to the Truffle project, but also to sister applications like the test RPC, or libraries like Ether Pudding, all these things that make Truffle what it is. So for ConSensys, this is exactly what we want to do. Open source, to answer your question directly, open source is part of our business.
Yeah. So obviously, it's not every day that you build a new general purpose framework for a new computing paradigm, or and also for a new language. So what are the interesting bits of that? What is what are the learning experiences? What are the surprising parts?
The biggest thing that I've learned when building Truffle is rolling my own. The idea that rolling your own solution to something is not always the best thing to do. So, for instance, and the biggest, some of the things I had to roll my own. For instance, there was no way to deploy. There was no easy way to deploy a contract of the Ethereum network without writing a lot of code on your own. There was you could compile, but that required a lot of code to manage the compiled artifacts. That stuff's working really well. However, one of the biggest things that I've gotten backlash on is the build process. The build process that comes shipped with Truffle is custom. I wrote it it came from those scripts that I had mentioned to you before, that came from Grunt, and I was using Grunt to build my front end, and I was doing it in a certain way. So then Grunt came with so many dependencies and slowdown that I eventually built my own from there. But developers are very picky about how they want their front end to be built.
Yeah.
And you realize that you can't support everybody. You can't support everybody, but you can't tell everyone how they should work. So the biggest thing I learned was, instead of creating this system that provides a pre-built structure, instead you create something more modular. You let things integrate, and you build tutorials. You build integrations with other pieces of software so that they can do what they want to do. For instance, we have a new website coming very soon, and it's going to include all the tutorials that tell people how to integrate their favorite set of build scripts or build software with Truffle. We have a Webpack build integration for all the people who love Webpack. And those people who love Webpack, they really love Webpack, and they want to work within their Webpack within their Webpack framework. So we have to support that. That's one of the things we have to support as an example. So long story short, the modular way to make people happy is one of the biggest learning experiences. I'm still working on that today.
Mm-hmm. So that fits in nicely with the next one. So obviously you just had Truffle 2.0, which is exciting, and there have been substantial changes in the way that it's being used, and the folder structure, and overall obviously migrations as well, which is an interesting one. So what are the next big things? What's the future? What does the future hold for Truffle?
The biggest feature that I hope to announce at DevCon, which will be in a few days.
Yeah.
Package management. So.
Oh wow. Okay.
One of the biggest problems with the with developing Ethereum contracts is there's really no good way to share them. And as a stepping stone, well, the ideal package manager is one that exists, that the registry exists on the Ethereum blockchain, that the actual package code itself exists on something like IPFS or Swarm. That's an ideal that I don't think we're going to get to anytime soon, because there needs to be a lot of agreement between all the people involved in the community, de facto standards, that sort of thing. But as a stepping stone to that, we can use NPM. And a lot of the structure of how Truffle, Truffle structures your application is built or is geared towards package management without you actually knowing that. So what this means is that pretty soon you're going to be able to put a Truffle DAMP on NPM. And this could be a library, for instance, a library that interacts with the blockchain. Put that on NPM, have other people dependency, use your contracts on the blockchain, use your contracts from the front end, integrate with your contracts, and we can easily support the ideal of many different contracts on a shared network, all communicating with each other. So that's the biggest thing.
I mean, that is actually pretty big. I mean, you know, I would say probably one of the biggest boosts in productivity in terms of web applications came from, you know, the idea of having gems or the equivalent, where you start off with an app, but you start off with tens of thousands of hours of development work already done. Right. It's
yeah.
It's impressive.
So we hope this will speed up development for everyone involved. Create a culture of sharing contracts, of interacting with other people's contracts, and just that global global world computer thing. So the next biggest thing I want to mention, which isn't necessarily Truffle related, this is actually already released, but it's a huge feature that comes from the test RPC. So it feels like a small feature because it adds just one more little command line argument on the when you type in test RPC in the command line, but it allows you to fork from any running blockchain. So if you have the live network running, say go Ethereum running across a live network, it has data, you can fork from not only that blockchain right over test RPC in an instant, but you can fork from any block. So for instance, I have an example where I forked from right before when the DAO ended. And then instead of the attacker taking over the DAO, I took over the DAO. And I was able to recreate the attack that the attacker used. So for instance, I can better understand security implications of my contracts, of contracts that are already deployed. I can use this forking feature to use live contracts to develop against live contracts. So I can use code that's already on the blockchain and integrate with that and know that my new contracts integrate with that before I deploy to the live blockchain. It uses live data as well since it's forking. And this forking feature is actually going to be one of the tools that package management is going to use. So for instance, if you deploy a Truffle application to NPM, it's going to store your deployed addresses for specific networks of your contracts. Well, the only way to access that in a development environment is to fork from the live network, because you don't want to make any transactions on live network. So you use a test RPC to fork there. You have the code that's been deployed, and then you develop against that code using the contracts that already exist. So huge. This is going to be, all of this is a huge change to the way we develop. Should speed
absolutely
speed up development. And along with this, one of the biggest things that we're trying to do is have tutorials and guides that at least, well, not just guides, documentation, right? That helps get people knowledgeable about what all this is. It's going to take a while before people completely ramp up to this new development paradigm, but once we have it, it should be amazing.
That's fascinating. That's definitely going towards much more towards productive development than it is now. I mean, those are substantial steps.
Yeah.
Cool. So just to because you found your way into blockchain and development, and we are working with quite a few people. Quite a few people come through our training, come through our online training. What advice would you give to people who are either wondering about getting into this space, or who are going through a course and are thinking about what they do afterwards, how to get in and what to do?
Right. So the biggest thing going in is to know that Ethereum, especially if you're a web developer, developing for Ethereum is a completely different way of developing. You don't have, in most cases, you don't have a backend anymore. You have to think about the backend in a different way, or putting it differently, Ethereum is your backend. Mm-hmm. And you have to understand all of the implications of that, and how that affects your users' behavior and how they interact with your application. So having a high-level overview of what that means is really important going in, and will make understanding developing for the blockchain much easier. Once you do that, I believe you asked, well, what do you do afterwards, after you come out of the courses, and how do you get into professional development? Is that correct?
Yeah, basically, what are the options? What would you recommend people do?
Right. So, what Ethereum is a very space. There's room for every developer who wants to program on the blockchain. It's not like, in no way have we reached any type of what was the word I'm looking for? Putting it differently, there's room for everybody, and if you want to program on the blockchain, the best thing to do is start building something, whether it's your own application, whether it's for somebody and you're getting paid, or if you're doing it on your spare time. Build the application, work with the tools, submit pull requests if you can, talk to the people on Gitter. Once you do that and you establish your network, you'll find that people are looking to hire very rapidly. ConSensys is one of those people, or one of those companies, but I know that it's absolutely not the only one. So once you establish yourself just with some kind of network, you'll find that you'll be pulled in really quickly. Everybody I talk to about Ethereum loves talking about it. It's a job I've never had before, one that I'm so excited about, that all the people I talk to are so excited about. And whenever I go to a meetup, or for instance DevCon, I just get super pumped each time about all the exciting things happening. So just become one of those people, do some of those exciting things, or something that you find exciting, and I'm sure you're going to find other people who find it exciting as well. And if you have any type of development skill at all, you'll find somebody who wants your help.
Cool. So to wrap up, and this is more of a wildcard question. Obviously, there is a lot of potential in blockchain, or it seems like there is a lot of potential in blockchain, and there is also probably a certain kind of dystopian element to it. So I'd be curious to know what you think is like the biggest upside, the biggest opportunity of blockchain, and what could be the biggest threat.
Interesting question. I don't know necessarily what killer app or biggest change to the way we live that blockchain is going to provide. I know that effectively, if you want to like bare bones, take all the sugarcoating off it, it's a shared database. Mm-hmm. The world is sharing a database with some functions that help you interact with the data, and that provides opportunity in nearly every aspect of our lives that we work together in. Obviously, and as you can see by all the companies getting involved, obviously finance are the first people picking this up. But you have everything from managing public information like mortgages or not mortgages, but home ownership or titles. People are doing more exciting things than I can fathom, and I know that for me, I at least get to build these tools that help everybody build what they want to build. As far as the biggest threat, I don't know. I don't know if I know the threat either. I know that the biggest challenge will be getting your mom and pop people to understand how the blockchain helps them, if not completely obfuscating the blockchain away from them. However, it really depends on where your application sits and who your users are and how technical they want to be. But ideally, the blockchain will support all these interactions with between people and between finance, and where we trade money and value. So getting them over that hurdle, I think, will be the biggest challenge. But once we can do that, I think this will be like the next internet.
Mm-hmm. Cool. That's all the questions we have. Thank you very much for joining.
Absolutely, I really appreciate it. And if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out.
Cool. Thank you. All right. Bye-bye. If you want to learn more about blockchain, check out our online courses at B9lab Academy, and also subscribe to this channel.